All right, folks, why don't we get started? Okay, we can begin this morning with a bracha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu ha'asok b'divrei Torah. Okay, so last week we introduced the second section of the daily service called Psuke de Zimra, or verses of song, or verses of psalms, and we looked at some of the origins to the idea of starting off prayers with a kind of the formal public prayer with a preliminary kind of a meditation or spiritual preparation that the early Hasidim, the early pious ones, did. And it wasn't clear what exactly it was they were doing, but we saw how over time that came to be interpreted as being a Hallel of sorts, not identified as the Hallel that we recite on festivals, but the Hallel that makes up the conclusion of the book of Psalms. That's Psalm 145 to 150. What we're going to do this morning is continue in more detail with Psuke de Zimra. And one other thing that we saw last week is the idea of blessings, brachot, that were placed as bookends to the beginning and at the end of Psuke de Zimra. So by invoking God with a blessing, what we're doing is we're saying that everything in between is the content that makes up the subject of that blessing. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now. And see what we got here. So here's Psuke de Zimra. So Pasuk and Zemer, we looked at those two words last week, verses of song. Let's look at in a bit of detail the two blessings. So here I put up the first half of what we would call Barukh She'amar. It's up on the screen. If you have a Siddur, you might want to take a look as well. If you are looking at Siddur, Siddur Sim Shalom for weekdays, it'll be on page 16. That's the burgundy and gray cover. If you are looking at the Siddur Sim Shalom for Shabbat, you're looking at page 83. And if you're in a different Siddur, you're on a different page. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that the blessings, Barukh She'amar, and then the closing blessing is Yishtabach, these are not in the Talmud, right? So these are post-Talmudic. We know that by the time we get to Rav Amram, the first Siddur in the 9th century, we know that these blessings already exist. We saw as well in the tour, we saw a comment that he thinks especially that Barukh She'amar is an especially beautiful blessing and it should be sung, right? So with nigun, with a beautiful melody of some sort. So let's look at it. So we begin, and pay attention, what are the themes that are being expressed here? So we start Barukh She'amar, v'haya ha'olam. So what is Baruch?
Blessed.
Blessed, right? So blessed, She'amar. Omer is to speak. So Barukh She'amar, blessed is the one who spoke, v'haya ha'olam. And the world was, or the world came into being. So here we have a reference to creation itself, right? God says, let there be light, and there is light. And then throughout the 6 days of creation, each act of creation is performed by God through an act of speech. So Baruch She'amar v'haya ha'olam, and then we have a simple statement, Baruch Hu, blessed is he. All right, now already, what does this feel like to you?
Redundant.
redundant.
Like the morning blessings.
Okay.
It's
Well, yes, certainly we brachot. We've been saying lots of brachot already. These are not these don't have the full blessing formula. We don't see the whole Baruch Atah, just the word Baruch.
It's just a reinforcement.
So Baruch Hu is a reinforcement, right? So if you were going to imagine how this might be recited out loud, just based on these first two lines, how might you imagine it?
Call and response.
Call and response, right? So antiphonally, right?
Yeah.
So a leader says something, a congregation says Baruch Hu. And in one of the early Siddurim of Saadia Gaon, he has the word, the expression Baruch Hu following every single one of these verses. And so, so it seems, at least in Saadia's day, that this was recited as a call and response between the leader and the congregation. In the Machzor Lev Shalem,
It is
so it's the Machzor that we use for the high holidays, they have it, the editors set it up like Saadia's Siddur. So it has Baruch Hu after each one of these lines, right, which I always find a little bit confusing because it's not how we typically do it. But
just leave it off.
leave off all the extra Baruch Hu's, right? So then we go on, we continue on themes of creation. Baruch Oseh V'Reshit. Blessed is the one who makes Breshit. Now Breshit actually means kind of in the beginning of, but here it kind of stands in for creation, right? We say Maseh V'Reshit are the works of creation. So this is Oseh V'Reshit, the one who does the works of creation. Baruch Omer Ve'Oseh, the one who speaks and makes, and does. Baruch Gozer U'Mekayem, blessed is the one who decrees and fulfills. All right, so again, we're using lots and lots of different verbs that essentially say the same thing. And now we shift gears a little bit. Baruch Mirachem Al Haaretz. So Mirachem is like Rachamim, so mercy. So blessed is the one who has mercy upon the earth or for the earth. Baruch Merachem al habriot. Blessed is the one who has mercy. Briot are for the creatures, right? Everything that's alive. Baruch Mishalem Sachar Tov Lireav. Blessed is the one who, let's say, fulfills or pays a good reward to those who fear him. All right. Baruch La'ad V'Kayam Lanetzach. Blessed is the one who lives for eternity and exists forever, something like that. Baruch Podeh Umatzil, blessed is the one who redeems and saves. And finally, Baruch Shemo, blessed is his name. Now, have we said God's name anywhere in this?
No.
We have not, right? God's name is Yud He Vav He. That doesn't appear anywhere in here. So we've just listed so many different ways in which we see God or we want to see God, and saying that for all of these reasons God is blessed.
In the prayer book it says glorified is the author of creation. So again, you have the author of creation.
Oh boy. Yeah. Once again, we have a non-literal translation.
Oh, okay.
So now looking at Sim Shalom, I'm just looking at the first word of each line. Praised, then we have sing praise, glorified, laud, acclaimed, revere, adored, honor, and another blessed, celebrate. The problem is that all of these translations, and I guess the editors were getting bored saying the same thing over and over again, but they kind of miss the essence of the structure of what this prayer is supposed to be, right? It's Baruch, blessed, and then we have a whole series of descriptions of God as a creator, as someone as merciful, and as finally as God rewards the good.
Yeah.
Right.
The blessed is much more positive than all these verbs that are just mentioned in the prayer book.
Yeah.
Kind of interesting. The very beginning, he speak about God, which is for all the world, not just for the Jewish people. Later, he start to go more detailed. He say, First Yerav, then he say is a nation. That means he start with the universe and go to the earth, to the people, and then he go to his nation, which is kind of focusing on us, which is not right away go like a cone.
Right. So, and that is a transition that we're going to see again and again as well. So when we look at Shema and the blessings, again, we start just like you said, Odette, we start with creation, and then we with kind of the universal, and then we get into the particularistic, specifically God's relationship to the Jewish people. But this prayer, Barukh She'amar, is totally universal.
Would you mind doing a little riff on the word blessed?
Sure. All right.
You know, I find it's a strange thing, you know, because it's in my face here so much. Are we saying, is it like thank you? Is it like...
So the word Baruch is connected to the word berech, which means knees.
Yeah.
Your birkayim are your knees.
Yeah.
And so Baruch, I think Baruch even has a connotation of bowing and prostration, right? So the act of falling to your knees before, whether it's a human king or in our context, the King of Kings, is an act of submission and an act of humility. Here we saw the reference to those who revere him, so it's an act of reverence. So first of all, there's that connotation, and of course for certain blessings, especially in the Amidah, we bow on some of the Baruch sentences, right? So the bending of the knee. So we have that connotation already. So it's an act of humility and obeisance, I guess. The other ironic thing, and I get this not from a rabbi, from an author named Nathan Englander. I think I've mentioned him before. I heard him interviewed. He did the translation of the New American Haggadah a few years ago, and I was really struck by his interview. And he talks about, I've mentioned this before, he talks about wanting to have a hyper-literal translation of the text. And he starts off with the bracha formula, right? So what do we do with Baruch, right? We're saying, bless you, God, essentially. Can we human beings do that? Mm-hmm. Right? Do we have the ability to proclaim God as blessed, right? So God is blessed regardless of whether or not we choose to acknowledge it, right? And so he was looking for some sort of way to translate the idea of Baruch that wasn't like, blessed are you, Lord, or something like that. And he discussed, like, when we invoke God as blessed, we're really invoking God as the source of blessing, right? That all blessing flows from God. So I think in his translation, I think he says, you are blessed, right? Which kind of removes us human beings from the equation entirely, right? And that actually is not a bad translation, because Baruch, if you can hear that the oo sound for the third letter, that indicates that it's a passive form of the word.
Okay.
So we're not saying, so like we say mivarech haShabbat, right? In the blessing for Shabbat. So God blesses the Sabbath. So in there, mivarech is an active verb. It's binyan PL. God is causing something to be blessed, or God is declaring it to be blessed. Baruch is something that already is blessed. There, the subject is God, but in a very passive sense. We're not doing any blessing of God. God already is blessed inherently.
Baruch is an adjective. It's not a verb.
Yeah, that's a big pa'ul. It kind of it's so, yeah. It's when verbs get very passive, they become like adjectives. Yeah.
So when we read this, it's like acknowledgement of that God is blessed.
Exactly, right? We have no power in this situation to suggest that we could make God blessed would suggest that we have power over God.
Well, if you wouldn't mind, I mean, I like what you're saying, but I'm just going to argue a little bit. Don't we have all of those midrashim that, you know, it's a two-way street between us and God, and if we weren't there doing things, then God would get upset, and so he needed us to be happy, or he needed us to take acknowledgement. So maybe there is something that we're supposed to do. God wants us to bless him the same way that he wants the angels to say kadosh kadosh, or, you know, I don't know.
No, I think you're right. I think that tension between, let's say, a transcendent God that really doesn't need us, that is perfect, right, versus a personal God that we can have a relationship with and that we can have an effect on. That tension's always there. In Kabbalah, the idea develops that God is broken somehow, or God is in exile, and we have the responsibility and the ability to reunite God, right? That God can't do it alone, right? We are the ones that have to repair the broken pieces, that have to reunite the male and the female, and a lot of that influence worked its way into the Siddur in the last 500 years. But it, you know, you might say that this is kind of a debate between maybe the philosophical and the mystical.
Mm.
All right, so this is the first half of Barukh She'amar. Let's look at the second half. All right. Okay, so now we're going to get a series of descriptions of God. I know that when I tend to read these in English, my eyes tend to glaze over. But there definitely is there is a method, and there are themes that are being introduced here. So let's take a look. So here we do begin with the bracha formula, Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech HaOlam, right? And then we continue. O God, merciful Father, who are praised by the mouth of your people, lauded and glorified by the tongue of your faithful servants, with the songs of your servant David will we praise you, Lord our God. With his hymns and psalms we exalt, extol, and glorify you. We will call upon your name and proclaim you King, our God. You who are one, the life of the universe, O King, praised and glorified be your great name for all time. And then we conclude with the bracha formula. Blessed are you, Baruch Atah Hashem, Melech Mehulal Batishbachot, King extolled with hymns of praise. So what have we just said here in this blessing? What themes do you pick up on?
It seems like this is more active, us doing things, versus the initial part was very passive.
Mm-hmm.
So praising by the mouth of our, we're singing, we're proclaiming, so we're doing things.
Yes, so here we've got a lot of verbs where we are the subject.
Right.
The verbs, right? We're going to be the ones who are doing things, and we use a lot of verbs that are essentially are synonyms of each other, right? Nigadelcha, right? So that's gadol, big or great, right? We're going to proclaim you great, right? Unishabechecha, shevach means praise. We're going to praise you, right? Unfa'ercha, pairs something like splendor. So we are going to proclaim your splendor. So something to that effect. Do these things really mean different things? Probably not so much. These probably are all meaning the same things. But one of the things that we see a lot in Jewish prayer is laying it on really thick. And it's the idea that we, with our words, we are with their limitations and with our own limitations, we're not able to express anything close to the essence of God. So why even bother trying? And so that's one possibility, is don't even bother trying. The other possibility is to throw everything at the wall and hope that something sticks, right? Or maybe that it's not even so much about what the meaning of all these things is, but the fact that we are using every word in the dictionary that says anything to do with praise, and we're going to use every single one of them in order to praise God. Right, and so there's a meaning in kind of that all-inclusiveness that goes beyond just the meaning of the words.
Yeah, what's interesting, it's all in plural. That means speak about the nation or the Israeli versus single person. It's not me, it's us all the time. Secondly is there's two kind of relation between Hashem, God and us, and between us and God. Is if you see, we do negadecha. That means we have to do something in return, but you also treat us like a father. So basically, there's relation how he treats us and how we treat him as a nation, not as a single. Later, we go to more the prayer of the single person.
Although there is a single person in this prayer.
Who? Hashem.
No.
David.
Us.
David.
David, right?
David.
Right there in the middle, right? With the songs of your servant David, will we praise you? All right. So this is actually telling us what is about to follow, right? We're going to get David's songs. So what are David's songs? The Psalms, right? So the book of Psalms is traditionally attributed to David. Actually, not the entire book, but a large chunk of the book of Psalms is attributed to David. David, of course, the musician, the lute player, and is kind of the poet extraordinaire in Jewish legend. And so we're using David's words in order to do all of these things of praise, all of these acts of praise towards God. Right. So I've mentioned before the way that brachot work in at least in the context of prayer, which is that you have a blessing, and the blessing serves as a summary of the theme. And then you have an expansion on the theme. Sometimes it can be extemporaneous. And then a conclusion of the theme with a closing blessing. So what all of Barukh She'amar is the introduction. It's the opening blessing. This entire page is the opening blessing for Pesukei de Zimra. And the completion of this blessing isn't going to occur until the very end of the service. And everything in between constitutes the elaboration upon the theme. So this captures the themes are essentially, we're going to proclaim, how, great God is with all of the adjectives that we possibly can come up with, and all the verbs we can possibly come up with. And we're going to be focused exclusively, or not exclusively, primarily on the Psalms composed by David. So now, instead of doing something that may be more extemporaneous, we are going to be picking out passages from the book of Psalms mostly. And in doing so, we're anthologizing to some degree, right? We're taking works from the Bible, from previous texts, and we're selectively choosing certain ones and putting them in a certain order in order to say something. And that is constituting our prayer. Okay, so this was the opening. Now let's look at Yishtabach. This comes all the way at the end, and in our Siddurim, this would be in the Sim Shalom for Shabbat, it's on 106. For weekdays, it's on page 29. Now, something interesting happens when we're davening in a minyan is that usually there's a different person who leads Pesukei de Zimra as compared to the person who leads Shacharit. And the handoff happens before Yishtabach. So on a weekday, the person leading Pesukei de Zimra would get to the bottom of page 28 and then go sit down. And then the next person would come up and would start leading at Yishtabach, which is kind of strange because what they're essentially doing is interrupting a blessing in the middle. Right? So the person who started with Barukh She'amar is not the person who finishes with Yishtabach. It's a different person. On Shabbat, there's a couple of extra song prayers that come first. Those are on 105. So we have Shochen Ad and Uvmach Halot. But essentially, those are lead-ins to Yishtabach. But really, the service of Pesukei de Zimra does not end until after Yishtabach. So let's see what it says. So Yishtabach, that's our word shevach, which is praise. Praised be your name forever, our King, great and holy God and King, in heaven and on earth. For to you, Lord our God and God of our fathers, pertain songs and praise, hymn and psalm, power and dominion, victory, greatness and might, renown and glory, holiness and kingship, blessing and thanks from now until eternity. Blessed are you, Lord, most exalted God and King, Lord of wonders, who is pleased with hymns, God and King, life of the universe. Whew, laying it on real thick.
How does that hymn go?
Would you mind singing a little bit in Hebrew or singing it so that
Yeah.
Yishtabach Shimcha La'ad Malkeinu. And then usually it would be done silently, and then right around here on brachot. This is on Shabbat, the melody for Shabbat. Brachot vehodaot me'ata ve'yaro laham baruch atah Hashem kelech gadol batishbachot
Elohim.
niflaot labocher b'shirei zimra. So that's the basic nusach, the basic melody for Shabbat morning. Reactions to not the melody, but the themes here.
So I had a question.
Yeah.
When I look at the three that I taught, an overarching theme appears, and I don't know if this is just the social worker in me, but you know, when we do an intake with a client, we talk about professional boundaries, what to expect, what we're going to offer, the rules of the program, what's not going to be provided, and what the person can't do based on the relationship we want to have with them, the helping relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the themes that I caught from this was that same sort of feeling, right? That same sort of, this is what God is going to do. This is what God expects from you. This is what is going to glorify God through the tongue, through the speaking, through the hymns. And it's a very interesting almost roadmap of how to give what is needed, but also what you're going to be provided through that relationship.
Right. So in Barukh She'amar, we said what we're about to do, right? We're going to praise God in, lots of different ways, and we're going to use David's Psalms primarily. Yishtabach, at the end of it, is we're saying what we just did, essentially. Of course, we're assuming as well that God has been pleased with what we did, right? So
depends who sings.
We are assuming that we have been successful, and that God. The word here is habocher b'shirei zimra, is the one who chooses, say, poems of song or something like that.
Yeah.
So God has chosen to receive what we have offered to God.
Yeah, small observation, interesting. I have two Siddurim, one Chabad, one is similar to what you have. Now at the very end, they say Melech El, Chai Olamim. Chabad say Melech Yachid, single king. That means in the last 200 years, they was able to modify slightly the meaning of the sentence.
So what exactly does it say?
Chabad say Melech Yachid, single.
And
single, yeah.
Anything
in
after
Chabad.
Anything after
I
Yachid?
can read it. Melech Yachid Chai Olamim, the same. The end is the same, but they modify El by Yachid. God, instead of God, they say single. Interesting.
Yeah.
Why they change it? I mean, there is some tendency in the Jewish community in large to modify the name, the blessing, to particular needs of people. That means they are not written in stone, as we say.
They are not written in stone, right?
And so some people modify it. And for me, it's modification important, but for me, it's more interesting to see why there's a need to modify it. Like the Reform prayer book probably is completely modified. They put the female and all the other modification, I call it. But why the Orthodox 200 years ago, they already changed it? Why there's a need to change the blessing? Or the
Why is there a
prayer?
need? Well, I think,
We know today we have to be running with the stream. Not
so yeah, I
against
think
the-
you got one of three options, right? Option one is you change it because you don't agree with what it says and you want it to say something different. Option two is someone screwed up and copied it down wrong.
I don't think so.
Oh, sometimes it certainly is the case. And option three is it's too long, and so we want to shorten it.
Yeah.
Right.
It's-
And so in I think most Reform Siddurim, a lot of Psukei de Zimra is cut out because it's too long, right? And and it is too long, right? So when we saw last week the development of Psukei de Zimra, and it probably started off something along the lines of, you know, personal meditation, or maybe somebody reciting a few verses and meditating on a few verses, and then it expanded into this voluminous thing. Like, we've kind of gotten away from the original point of this. So maybe there's some wisdom in trying to cut back down to the original intent of what Psukei de Zimra was supposed to be about. I want to show one thing kind of in light of this conversation. So you'll notice here the commas. Melech el chei ha'olamim. All right, so Melech means king. El means God. Chei ha'olamim. So chei is it's for chaim, life, but it's chei because it's in smichut form. In other words, it's a conjunction, two nouns that go together. So chei ha'olamim is life of the worlds, or life of eternity. Here we translated it life of the universe. Okay. I'm looking at Art Scroll right here, where they have eliminated both commas, or let's say they've left out both commas. It just says Melech el chei ha'olamim without any pause. And the way you will hear this chanted often in more traditional settings, we'll break it up like this. Habocher b'shirei zimra melech el chei ha'olamim. Does that sound familiar?
Mm-hmm.
All right, and it's wrong.
No, Melech El.
It is completely grammatically incorrect or let's say syntactically incorrect to sing it that way.
We say
Because
Melech
what we've
El.
done, Melech El Chei, King God Life, and then Ha'olamim, let's say of the universe or of eternity. But the problem is that Chei Ha'olamim have to go together. Because Chei is a conjunction with Ha'olamim. They have to go together. So something that Siddur Sim Shalom did and tries to do a lot, at least in the Hebrew, tries to correct what scholars have identified as errors that creep their way into standard Siddurim. And so this is one example of that. And I'm guessing it's based on some manuscript from 1,000 years ago or something. But yeah, so probably at a time when there were no commas, that developed in this way. But
what's the correct way?
The way that it is right here with the comma.
Yeah.
You have to pause after the word el.
So how do you chant it? How do you chant it?
Melech el chei ha'olamim. That's how I do it. But.
So if you look for Hebrew grammar, the subject is the Melech, and El is the adjective. That means El describes this kind of king.
But El is a noun. El means God.
No, this is what is described. Therefore, when you go to Chabad, they say Melech Yachid.
Yeah, well, that's another way of getting around the problem, is they get rid of the word that doesn't seem to belong. Right.
I mean, Eli cannot be adjective, but Yachid is adjective.
Yeah.
Therefore, they solve the problem by putting that God is the only king, Yachid.
Melech Yachid, Chei HaOlamim.
Yeah, and he bring the life to the world.
Yeah.
Not that to our world, but other words. That
Other world.
mean this kind of interesting. You don't say Olam, Olamim. That mean many people believe that there is not only one word. There's many words, and this kind of interesting that in order to pray they put plural. It means they maybe mean universe, but maybe they mean the Olam Hazeh and Olam Haba.
Right.
Kind of interesting reason why they put Olamim and not Olam.
Yeah, it is. It's curious. All right, let's go on. We're going to come back to Yishtabach in a little while, but the structure of Psukei de Zimra. Now, as we saw last week, when Psukei de Zimra emerged as a service, let's say, for everyone, it initially was Psalms 145 to 150, which make up the conclusion of the book of Psalms. And then we saw by the 9th century, we had opening and closing blessings, right? So we've got the Barukh She'amar at the beginning, Psalm 145 to 150, and then Yishtabach at the end. And then it makes perfect sense. In Barukh She'amar, we saw, okay, we're going to use David's Psalms to praise you. Then we do it, and then we conclude and said, and thank you for accepting all of our praises of you, right? So that's nice. So, but it did not end there. In medieval times, 2 additional sections emerged. And I don't know, I can't tell you the exact order in which they emerged, but we get some material coming in between Barukh She'amar and Psalm 140 to 150, and we get some more additional material kind of between, before Yishtabach, right? And so it's all biblical material, right? So Psukei de Zimra is completely from the Tanakh. It's just that, traditions developed, and we'll see some of the themes, but traditions developed that we needed to do more than just Psalms 145 to 150. And now that is what makes up Psukei de Zimra. All right, so let's see. So we're going to look at Biblical Interlude 1, or the first section after Barukh She'amar. So I didn't include all the text here because that would be a lot of text, but if you have a Siddur, I invite you to open it up to whatever comes immediately after Barukh She'amar.
We'll get it.
And so we begin with a series of verses beginning with words Hodu l'Adonai. Hodu is give thanks to the Lord. So this is from Divrei Hayamim, or First Chronicles, chapter 16, verses 8 to 36. And I'll give us a moment to maybe read to ourselves. What are the themes? What are the stories that are being expressed here?
More praises, looks like it.
A lot of praising, yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, we begin with, Hodu l'Adonai in an imperative form, right? We're telling people, praise God. So we start with praise, which is certainly on our theme.
We invoke the patriarchs.
Invoke the patriarchs.
Remember the main covenants.
Yeah, a invocation of covenants.
An offering to God.
Where do you?
I'm looking at page 85 in the Shabbat Siddur.
85. Okay, yes. Right. So we get a little bit of a history of Israel, at least from the early patriarchs, and lots of instructions to give praise to God. The Book of Chronicles is one of the later books of the Bible. It's understood to be, Second Temple, although kind of writing back, about the Davidic court. It's kind of a revision of the history, but as a later book, it reflects kind of later styles and even even almost kind of a prayer style to it in parts, and this in some ways this section seems to be evoking language of Psalms itself. Right? We get Hodul Adonai Ki Tov Ki Le'olam Chasto is part of this. So Divrei Amim is itself quoting Psalms. We also get the word Baruch appearing here towards the very end. So a number of themes that will appear in the Psalms later, but that are captured here. So at some point, in medieval times, someone thought it was, some community decided they wanted to add a section from Chronicles. And then beginning kind of on the bottom of page 18 in the weekday Siddur, 85 in the Shabbat Siddur. Sim Shalom doesn't give us the sources, but what comes next is just rapid fire, a bunch of quotations, individual verses or two verses from Psalms collected from throughout the Psalms. So it's kind of a choose your favorite Psalm kind of thing. But what has happened is that an editor, some worshiper at some point compiled all of these verses together and put them in a way that creates their own poetry, right? By bringing all these disparate sources together, and it kind of works.
Yeah.
Again, it's a lot of the similar themes of praising and describing God's attributes and asking for redemption. All of these things, which kind of the bread and butter of prayer.
Yeah, something interesting. Towards the end, he said, "Kaptzenu mikol ha'amim." This is not a one gola that in the time of Yechezkel. Now the nation is spread all over the world. That means this sentence probably put much later.
The Kaptzenu v'atzleinu min hagoyim. So that's from
Yeshayahu.
that's from the Divrei Hayamim section. So yeah, bring us together from all of the nations. Right. That's an exile. Seems to be an exile.
Big one.
Yeah.
It's not one exile Bavel or exile of Purim. It's much more than that.
Mm-hmm. All right. So we Chronicles, we get some Psalms, and then we get to Psalm 100. Now, in the weekday Siddur, you'll find this on page 20. In the Shabbat and Festival Siddur, you will not find it here.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
It does not appear here.
Yeah.
If you want to see it, you could go to page 205.
Oh, okay.
So this is Psalm 100. Let's actually look at the Mizmor LeTodah. Already we have a problem with the translation. Mizmor is a psalm. What is Todah?
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Why do we translate this as a psalm of praise? I don't know. Seems to kind of miss the point, right? So then,
It's more.
right? Hariyu Adonai kol haaretz, right? So sing praises, ring out to the Lord, all of the earth. Ivdu et Adonai b'simcha, worship or serve the Lord in joy. Come before him with ringing, singing. Know that Adonai is God. He made us and we are his people and sheep of his shepherding. Right? Bo'u she'arav b'todah, enter into his gates in thankfulness. Chatzerotav b'tila, his courtyards with praise. Hodu lo Barukh She'amar, give thanks to him. Blessed is his name, or call bless his name. Ki tov Adonai le'olam chasdo, for good is the Lord, his kindness, his loving kindness is eternal. Ve'ador v'ador emunato, until generation and generation is his faithfulness. Right, so a short psalm, a fairly simple psalm, a very joyous psalm. So the beginning, Mizmor LeTodah, psalm of thanksgiving, gives us some indication about what this was used for. So this was, it's assumed that this psalm was recited when someone would bring a thanksgiving psalm to the temple, right? And that was a thanksgiving sacrifice. That was a voluntary offering that a person who was feeling gratitude to God would bring. And so they had, not only would they get to bring it, they got to eat most of it also after the priest sacrificed it, is that they would recite this psalm to accompany their offering. This appears in the Shulchan Aruch, and I'd like to share what the Shulchan Aruch says about this psalm as far as its placement in our services. Shulchan Aruch, just as a reminder, law code from the 16th century, right? The last comprehensive law code in Judaism. So he begins, Mizmor LeTodah, Yesh L'omro bin Nigina, Shekol Hashirot Atidot Libatel Chutz Mizmor LeTodah, right? So Mizmor LeTodah, the Psalm of Thanksgiving, should be said within a melody, because all of the songs in the future will be canceled except for Mizmor LeTodah, right? So in the future, this is Olam Haba, right? So when the Mashiach comes, we're not going to need to daven anymore. We're not going to need to say the Psalms anymore, except this one, Psalm 100. This is going to stay because it's so joyous, right? This is the happiest Psalm in the book, right? We've got to give thanks to, sing praises to God, bisimcha, with joy, right? So it's a wonderful Psalm. So I like to do it if not singing, at least out loud. And it's also customary to stand. You'll see it goes on comment. So that's the comment of Moshe Isserles, who puts the Ashkenazi gloss on the Shulchan Aruch, which is Sephardi. And he adds, we don't say Psalm of Thanksgiving on Shabbat or on holidays or on the days of Pesach. Why? Because the Thanksgiving offering was not sacrificed on those days on account of rights, right? That's just the Pesach part. There's certain days when you can't bring a Todah offering, a Thanksgiving offering. So it doesn't make sense for us to be reciting the Thanksgiving Psalm on those days, right? Why else? When else? Also Erev Pesach, Erev Yom Kippur, right? And then he says, V'chein nahagu b'medinot elu, and that's become our custom in our lands, which is why this psalm did not appear in Psukei de Zimra on Shabbat. Well, you had to go to page 205 for it. On 205, you get some extra prayers that are inserted on the holiday of Hoshana Rabbah, which has kind of its own weird tradition. So, but that's why you wouldn't find Mizmor LeTodah in its usual place in a Siddur that focuses just on Shabbat and festivals. All right. So this psalm got added to Pesukei de Zimra as well, right? No, this isn't part of 145 to 150. And then we get a few more verses, and all from Psalms except for one, which is from Chronicles. I guess there's some from Mishle a little bit also. And then we've kind of built up to Psalms 145 to 150, which is the daily Hallel, right? And this is the part that is actually that we actually want, that was kind of first put in as the center of Psukei de Zimra. I don't want to go in detail through all of these Psalms, except to say that next week we are going to look at Psalm 145, the Ashrei, in detail. I did want to take a quick look at Psalm 150, though, which is the final Psalm. It's short, 6 verses long. It closes out the book of Psalms, and it's quite beautiful. And Sherry, your background is really appropriate for this psalm. So we start Hallelujah. Hallelujah is give praise, Yah, to God, right? And then we elaborate on that. Hallelujah El Bekodsho, Birkia Uzo, I praise God in his sanctuary, in his heaven of power, Bigvurotav in his might, Karov Gudlo for his abundant greatness, Beteka Shofar, with the shofar's blast, the blast of the shofar, Benevil V'chinor, harp and lyre, Betofu Machol, drum and dance, Beminim V'ugav, strings and flute, Betziltzele Shama, Betziltzele Trua, resounding cymbals, blasting cymbals. Don't ask me what the difference between them is. And then we conclude it, Kol HaNeshamat Hallelujah, Hallelujah. Let every breath praise God. Hallelujah. And you'll see it in parentheses. That's because when we use this in the service, that final line is repeated. So we say it twice. But it's not actually part of the psalm twice. It only appears once in the psalm. So this is painting a picture of perhaps, or likely, how God is worshipped in the temple. At least, with the first temple, second temple, I don't want to say, but we've got a full orchestra here. We've got singing. We've got dancing even, right? So there seems to be, a full-on production in the temple as part of the regular worship of God.
We have a harp and a lyre and a flute and cymbals in our shul.
We don't. We don't.
We have strings. Do we have strings?
We have strings. No, and
just
this all
voice.
happened on Shabbat as well in the temple. So after the destruction of the temple, the practices changed. And no longer were there instruments on Shabbat. Or actually for some period of time, even at all, right? Except for, like a wedding, you wouldn't even have any because there's out of a sign of mourning that eventually gets discarded. But the ban on instruments on Shabbat stuck. And it's not totally clear what the reason is for the ban. There is a discussion in the Talmud that says we don't play instruments on Shabbat because one of them might break and then we would be tempted to go and fix it.
It's a sad and sorry excuse.
And no, it is. And Tosfot agrees. Tosfot, one of the major commentaries in the Talmud, then says that, but in our day, since most people don't know how to fix instruments, you don't have to worry about that. Okay? So in other words, there doesn't seem to be a halachic problem with instruments on Shabbat.
Yeah.
Right? Nowadays you'll hear people will say, well, maybe it's for the tuning. Right? To tune the instrument is like you're completing it or you're fixing it.
Maybe just bringing the instrument to the shul in Shabbat.
Maybe you're carrying it to so that's why we don't blow shofar on Shabbat, because we're worried about carrying it. There isn't evidence for that either. The best evidence I've seen is a very detailed analysis by Ethan Tucker, where he looks at all of the sources that talk about instruments and specifically noise making on Shabbat. And what he identifies is a general interest by the rabbis of Shabbat being a quiet, peaceful day, and that instruments would interrupt the kind of the peacefulness of the day. One of the sources that Ethan brings is there's actually you're not allowed to use a door knocker on Shabbat. Like a door knocker.
What about? Yeah, that's crazy.
Right?
What about someone like Chevy knocking on the Siddur?
Well, yeah, I mean, you go to Hasidic shuls and there's plenty of banging on tabletops and things like that. So one of the things that comes through in Ethan's analysis is that was an early attitude that the rabbis had that didn't stick. So in other words, that might have been the original idea behind no instruments on Shabbat, but that original idea was lost, and then essentially you just have a custom that is preserved of not playing instruments on Shabbat, and with the original reason perhaps lost.
How about during the week, though, Rabbi?
Sorry?
How about during the week? I mean, was it just because they were mourning the temple? The rabbis, in developing new ways of worship,
Yeah.
continued with music, with dancing, singing, all of those things, even though you couldn't offer the sacrifices.
Yeah, I forget the exact source. There's a passage in the Talmud where two rabbis are walking along, and the younger one says, "Woe to the temple! How can we rejoice? How can we do anything, happy with in our state of exile and destruction?" And the rabbi says, "Well, life goes on. Essentially, life goes on, and you got to enjoy life."
That doesn't answer it, though.
That's not
Why didn't
really
incorporate the musicality into daily services, at least.
Yeah, I agree.
I think in Israel, this song, actually everybody sing it, not necessarily in a synagogue. That means just a song that every people sing it to be happy. That means happy song is not from the Torah, is not necessarily have to be dedicated for synagogue. You can sing it just
whenever, right?
Public,
so I think the question is
want.
why specifically not in worship?
Yep.
Well, we certainly get a very extensive tradition of music, of vocal music.
Vocal, yes, but not
worship. No question about that.
Yeah.
The ban on Shabbat and festivals has its own history. The question is essentially why not on weekdays?
Right.
I suspect there might be a practical aspect of that, which is that people you gotta daven 3 times a day. Like, you want to kind of get in and get out.
I don't know. Those melodies and trope are so boring on the weekday services. They could really use some sprucing up with some instruments.
Yeah, kind of interesting. Some Reform synagogue have the rabbi play the guitar as part of the service. There was some rabbi from the Orthodox community that sing with guitar, and he'd been actually pushed out from Chabad. Very famous, the rabbi that sing, this name.
No, Carlebach.
Carlebach, yeah, he was singing with guitar.
Sure, and we're seeing a renaissance in Jewish music today. There's so much out there, including in the Orthodox world.
Yeah, that's what's interesting. That started doing, but the mainstream, the Orthodox, become too much to the right.
They've gone very far to the right. So anything, maybe
they don't even sing the song.
Secular, but there really is a renaissance. And I've heard of Orthodox synagogues, like on Rosh Chodesh, for example, when it's a weekday, that they would play instruments like for Hallel.
Mm.
So I think that there's a lot of experimenting going on around that, and certainly in a not during prayers, but concerts using language, the liturgy from prayers, but doing it kind of in a concert type of setting. There's been a lot of that.
I guess what I keep not struggling with, but I keep asking myself, if I were creating a new Judaism, what would I do? Mm-hmm. And that whole idea that the Levites were just there to do all this singing and so on in the background, why wouldn't I incorporate them into my new prayer world? And I can't see a reason for not doing it, even if intellectually I'm saying, well, I'm doing Talmud kind of things because we're not making sacrifices anymore. But I think I still would have incorporated some of the other things. And I think it would have been an easier sell to the people because it would have been transitional.
You can take all the Levites in the Sinai community to come to the Bima and sing some songs. Which would be kind of idea. I
don't disagree with you. I'll tell you. When I put up the material from today on the website, I'll include a link to Ethan's essay if that's something that you're interested in. It's been a while since I read it. So I don't remember all the details, but he does go through these issues in quite a lot of detail.
Because we have Birkat Kohanim, and you can have the song of the Levite, which go hand in hand.
Yeah. So I think the question though is, why is there not more let's say formal music as part of the service on a regular basis with
Vocal,
orchestra?
It can be vocal. It don't have to be.
No, you need instruments. No, you need instruments.
But we have the vocal tradition.
The vocal's there.
Yeah, this is the instrument.
I'm bringing my cymbals to shul next time.
All right, so I think we'll stop here now, and we'll next week we will continue on with the rest of Psukei de Zimra, and I want to focus on Ashrei.
Right.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Nice to
Thank
see
you,
everybody.
Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you.
Coming. Have a
good rest of the week.
Yeah,
Thank you.
you too.
All right, so
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Be well.